Nandito tayo ngayon para ipagdiwang ang ikalawang anibersaryo ng Rice Tarrification Law o RTL. Hindi po naging madali ang pagsasabatas nito sa gitna ng kritisismong natanggap mula sa ilang mga grupo na nananawagan pa rin na ipawalang bisa ito at ipagkait ang mga benepisyong maibibigay ng RTL sa mga darating na taon. Gusto po naming ipaalala na ilang dekada nang tinututukan at pinoprotektahan ang rice sector, alang-ala sa tinatawag na rice self-sufficiency. Through numerous projects and policies aimed at artificially restricting imports and increasing production, such as free irrigation, we were able to produce around 90% of our domestic rice needs from the year 2000 to 2020. Ngunit ang naging kapalit nito ay malaking pabigat sa mga consumers, lalong-lalo na sa mga mahihirap, mga maliliit na magsasaka na mas malaki pa ang binibiling bigas kaysa sa kanilang inaani, mga manggagawa, taxpayers at kahit na sa ating kabataan. Clearly, the development of this sector needed to be managed differently. The Rice Tarrification Law addresses the long-standing issues in the sector for the benefit of 2 million farmers, 110 million consumers, and tens of thousands of retailers, wholesalers, millers, and those in the warehousing and transport business. Sa kabila ng mga kritisismo, patuloy na tinutupad ng Rice Tarrification Law ang pangako nito para sa mga Pilipino. Una, ang mas mababa at mas stable na presyo ng bigas na nakakatulong sa mga mahihirap na consumers. Pangalawa, suporta para sa mga magsasaka upang sila ay maging mas competitive sa rice production. At pangatlo, improved food security sa bansa at mas mababang antas ng malnutrition lalo na sa mga kabataan. Sa madaling salita, ang Rice Tarrification Law ay makatutulong sa pag-unlad ng lipunan. In the past 2 years of its implementation, RTL has shown clear gains towards achievement of its goals. Una, sinisiguro ng RTL ang mababa at stable na presyo ng bigas para sa mga mamimili. Ang presyo ng bigas ay nananatiling mababa. The average retail price of a regular milled rice from March 2019 throughout 2020 after the passage of RTL was 37.19 pesos per kilo. This was about 8.50 pesos per kilo lower compared to the highest retail price in September 2018, while prices in the year 2020 were only slightly lower by around 0.42% compared to 2017 and by 2.63% compared to 2019. Rice prices have been on a downward trend. The average price in 2020 could have been lower if not for the consecutive typhoons and flooding in the last quarter of 2020. Napanatili rin ng Rice Tarrification Law na maging mas stable ang presyo ng bigas kumpara noong nasa quantitative restriction or QR regime tayo, kung saan ang malawakang pag-angkat ng bigas ay pinipigilan. This has prevented consumers from falling into poverty, promoted farm-level investment, and encouraged investment throughout the economy by reducing the noise in the prices of other goods. It also helped promote social and political stability. Ang Rice Tarrification Law ay mahalaga hindi lang dahil sa pagbaba ng presyo ng bigas, kundi dahil pinalawak din ito ang pamimilian ng ating mga consumers. The expanded availability of different rice types and varieties in the local market, either from local produce or from imports, has provided consumers more options to choose from, depending on their budget and preference on quality. Pangalawa, sinusuportahan ng Rice Tarrification Law ang mga magsasaka upang matulungan silang mas maging competitive. Mula noon, ang Department of Agriculture at iba pang mga ahensya ng gobyerno ay patuloy na nagbibigay ng suporta sa mga rice farmers sa pamamagitan ng mga iba't ibang programa at assistance. Sa transition period na ito, habang ang mga magsasaka ay mas naging exposed sa open rice market, sinisiguro ng Rice Tarrification Law na makakakuha sila ng dagdag na suporta para sila ay maging competitive. The 10 billion peso Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund or RCEF, that the RTL made readily available through yearly budget appropriation is now fully being implemented to modernize the sector and enhance the competitive stance of rice farmers. The seed component implemented by PhilRice has to date resulted in an additional yield of 400 kilograms per hectare among RCEF seed beneficiaries. This translates to about 7,000 pesos per hectare in additional earnings for rice farmers. Moreover, in RCEF farm demo sites, production cost has been reported at 10 pesos per kilogram, lower than the national average of 12 pesos per kilogram. The extension component implemented by ATI, PhilRice, PhilMec, and TESDA has taught new and more appropriate farming practices to more than 70,000 farmers, 200 rice specialists, 7,000 trainers, 800 seed growers, inspectors, analysts, and other extension intermediaries. The credit component implemented by the Land Bank of the Philippines and Development Bank of the Philippines has extended loans to almost 6,000 farmers to overcome the impacts of natural elements that devastate rice fields and soak rice harvests. The mechanization component implemented by the PhilMec has distributed at least 13,000 units of machineries to farmer cooperatives and associations to encourage the use of efficient and cost-reducing technologies in rice farming. Ang mga pansamantalang problema na naranasan ng mga magsasaka sa simula ay dulot ng pagbaba ng farm gate price ng tuyong palay from 20.4 pesos per kilo in 2018 to 16.47 pesos per kilo in 2019. Ngunit ito ay dahil nagkaroon ng maling pag-anunsyo ang NFA ng National Rice Shortage kahit na ang NFA stock inventory lamang ang bumaba. The farm gate price eventually settled at an average of 16.72 pesos per kilo in 2020 when the government rolled out interventions to support farmers by making NFA procurement operations more visible in areas where traders are claimed to be taking advantage of abnormal market situations. The government has allocated a total of 56.2 billion pesos in 2019 and 68.1 billion pesos in 2020 for the rice sector. This included subsidies to those that were extremely affected by either the market adjustment or by natural disasters, as well as credit assistance in terms of low interest rates and extension of repayment period. These are significantly higher than the 56 billion pesos which critics erroneously claimed and overestimated to be the cumulative loss in the first 2 years of the RTL. All the interventions enabled the rice sector to produce 19.3 million metric tons of rice in 2020, its highest production in years, in spite of COVID-19 and the consecutive typhoons and flooding in the fourth quarter of 2020. These initial gains will be accelerated with a continued timely and effective implementation of RCEF and other regular rice programs and projects. Ang patuloy na paglago ng rice sector sa ilalim ng liberalized rice market ay patunay na epektibo ang Rice Tarrification Law. Pangatlo, nakatutulong ang Rice Tarrification Law sa pagpapabuti sa food security at pagpapababa ng bilang ng malnutrition sa bansa. The availability and accessibility of low and stable rice prices have improved our country's food security. Ito ay kitang-kita sa negative rice inflation rates na nag-average ng minus 3.3% from April 2019 to December 2020. The share of rice in the CPI or Consumer Price Index basket is 9.6%, which makes it the second highest contributor next to housing at 12.9%. A high rice inflation rate from increasing and unstable rice prices can elevate the inflation and make food items too costly and inaccessible, lalong-lalo na sa mga mahihirap sa panahon ng COVID. From 2017 to March 2019, before RTL was enacted, rice was consistently among the top 10 contributors to annual inflation. In 2018, rice was number 2 with a contribution of 0.5 percentage points to the 5.2% annual inflation rate. At the height of the 2018 rice crisis, the rice contributed as high as 1 percentage point to the overall inflation of 6.7% in October 2018. With the enactment of the RTL in 2019, rice ceased to be one of the top contributors to inflation and has been even negative for most of the past 23 consecutive months. Ibig sabihin, bumababa talaga ang presyo ng bigas. The situation has enabled people, especially the poor, to more adequately meet their daily food and dietary requirements. Kagaya ng ibang reforma, nakaranas tayo ng temporary at short-term setbacks habang tayo ay nagta-transition mula sa luma patungo sa bagong rice regime. Sa mas mahabang panahon, makakatulong ang pagbukas ng rice trade sa pag-unlad ng kalagayan ng mga magsasaka ng palay, lahat ng mga rice consumers at ng buong bansa. As we continue to implement the reform, we expect to further reduce poverty in the country. Based on the joint study conducted by the International Rice Research Institute and the International Food Policy Research Institute, some 1.2 million people have been lifted out of poverty as a result of the Rice Tarrification Law. Moreover, a study by NEDA and IFPRI in 2019 shows that with improved availability and accessibility of rice, the proportion of malnourished children will be reduced by 2.8%, and the population at risk of hunger in the country will be reduced by 15.4% by 2025. Taken together, these are equivalent to around 2.1 million less people at risk of hunger and malnutrition. The study also shows that RTL is expected to accelerate agriculture growth and facilitate the structural transformation of the economy, with GDP or our gross domestic product increasing by at least 0.13 percentage points in 2025. Sa halaga ngayon, ito ay katumbas ng halos 23 billion peso kada taon na dagdag sa ating ekonomiya. The genuine support and interventions being mobilized through the RTL, the use of high-quality and certified seeds, the promotion of farm machineries to modernize production management, the extension of training on appropriate and disaster-resilient farm practices, and the financial assistance to reduce farmers' vulnerability to natural elements are key in developing a more competitive rice sector. Sa pamamagitan ng RTL, mas maraming Filipino consumers ang nakakabili ng makalidad na bigas sa presyong na mas mababa at mas malapit na sa presyo ng mga ating ASEAN neighbors. Sa pamamagitan ng RTL, dadami ang mga matagumpay na mga Filipino Rice Farmer Awardees kada taon. Sa pamamagitan ng RTL, we hope to see a structural change through the development and expansion of high-value commodities. Ang ilan sa mga ito ay may malaking comparative advantage at export potential na magdudulot ng mas marami at mas mabuting trabaho. Sa huli, gaano man kaganda ang isang batas, magiging tagumpay lamang ito kung magtutulungan ang lahat ng mga stakeholders. What we are showing are the early gains of the RTL. Mas marami at mas malawak pa ang pwede nating maabot sa RTL kung lahat tayo sa gobyerno, sa pribadong sektor, sa civil society organizations, mga farmer cooperatives, at iba't ibang mga grupo ay magtutulungan. The cry to repeal the RTL fuels uncertainty, which affects the economic decisions of all rice stakeholders and unfortunately prolongs the rice market adjustment and transition to the new and better equilibrium. We therefore renew our call for all of us to give this law a chance and to join NEDA and other government agencies in overcoming the challenges of the rice sector. Maraming salamat po at mag-ingat po kayo lahat.